Welcome. Today's shir as the summer shir in memory of Mrs. Edith Nussbaum, as well as today's my father's yurtzeit, Avi Mori, Rafoi Chemer, Shlomo Ben Chaim Tzvi, Shavet Elias Neshama. So I figured because of that, we're talking about Kibbutz Avim. That's Gzer Shava. So now, what I would like to do is do something a little bit different when it comes to Kibbutz Avim. And that is, I want to point out there's a dual aspect of the mitzvah. So take a look at source number 1. Ish imo v'aviv tira'u v'es shabsosa tishmoru. That first of all, we have here what's called moral. We have here what's called fear. Now, fear doesn't mean the sense of, it's your father, it's not your mother, right? It's not that same fear of, scared trepidation like haunted house type of fear. It's much more awe, right? It's much more the fear of, of the awful sense from the word awe, filled with awestruck. It's not that, it's not trepidation, but it's a sense of fear. Now, the Bali Musar talk about different types of fear that exist. You're a me'achet, are you worried about punishment? Here, it's not talking about that type of fear. It's much more talking about fear from a sense of an awesome fatherly figure. The second source, which I probably should have had first because it appears first, is kabed esavicha v'yasimecha. That a person needs to honor, a person needs to respect one's parents. These are two very different mitzvot, two different parameters, and they are counted by the Rishonim as two separate mitzvot, right? Now, it's interesting, and this perhaps is a conversation not for now, is no one counts Kibbutz Av as one and Kibbutz Ema as another, right? It's all it's all subsumed under one category. What also is an anomaly, and I think requires a little bit of discussion, is where is the location in the Sat Jul of Kabed et Avicha v'Yatimecha? Do we have a Sat Jul behind us? No, we don't. Wow, that's you don't see that too often. No Sat Jul here. Okay, so where does it sit in our list of 10 dibrot? Where does Kabed et Avicha sit?
On Ben on the Makam side.
Ben on the Makam side, right? It's the fifth one. It ends the Ben on the Makam side. Now, you could argue that the first 5 have a common denominator. You can't really call it Ben Adon L'Makom because you have parents who are not. You have something else, and that is the first 5 are all connected to creators, meaning God or parents, because we know that there are 3 people that created you: your parents and God. So it's interesting, and we'll talk about this at the end. But there's a lot of parallels between how you relate to your parents and how you relate to God. So there's the biological component to it, right? Which is, existence and life, and just like God provides for you, so do your parents provide for you, right? And that's one aspect, as we're going to see in a minute, which is going to play a very important role. And I want to also see a few nafkamin as the halacha, which we'll touch on as well. And then there's the other aspect, which is, of course, that's the yira. Okay. So what's interesting about kabed et avicha is that it sits in that 5th one, which is between you and your creators, but it's the bridge also to ben adam l'chaver. Almost as if it plays like this dual role. That's 2 sides of the coin, and maybe that's the reason why it's the 5th one, because it's playing, and it's the bridge maybe also between the 2 sides of the dibrot as well that we've seen. Okay. There's a Gemara that says the following. The Gemara says, source number 3, Amar Rabbi Amar Yitzchak Bar Shmuel Bar Matana Gadol Talmud Torah Yoter Kibbutz Avim. Okay, very interesting statement. By the way, you know what is greater than Kibbutz Avim? Talmud Torah. What's it prove? Shekol Otan Shanim Shaya Yaakov Vinu Beveit Ever Lo Nenash. As long as Yaakov was sitting, as long as Yaakov was sitting in yeshiva, he wasn't punished. But when he was in the house of Lavan, he paid for the fact that he didn't feel Kibbutz Avim. When he was in yeshiva, Talmud Torah was greater than Kibbutz Avim. But when he was in the house of Lavan and his father he was not taking care of his father, he's Nanash. Now, what's strange about this statement is the following. Because I don't understand. What is the obligation vis-a-vis a person and the responsibility to take care of their, in this case, let's point out, their father? Didn't Yaakov have a brother? What was Esav known?
Famous for Kibbutz Avim.
Famous for Kibbutz Avim. So does that absolve Yaakov of his responsibility? So the question is, depends. What is responsibility to one's parent. Now, if it's making sure that your parent has food and clothing is taken care of, so are those things presumably taken care of even when Yaakov was away? Yeah, Esav took care of it. Esav was legendary at those things. Esav made sure his father had food and made sure his father... That's not the problem. So then what was the problem? I want to show you that I think there's two components. Meshech Chochmah talks about it, and it's source number 4. There are two components. It's a very long Meshech Chochmah, a little complicated, but I tried to highlight a couple of things. Let's do this together. So this Meshech Chochmah is on the second one, meaning it's on Ish Imo of Aviv Tirao. That's what this Meshech Chochmah is on. Take a look at 4. Yachol afilu amarlo aviv imo lavor al achad mikol mitzvat hamar batorah yishma lahem. Tamud lamor. No. Vet shabtutai tishmoro. Meaning, you might think that if mom and dad asks you, can you do me a favor? Can you take me to the mall on Shabbos? No. Why? Since in the same pasuk as Ish imo aviv tirao talks about Shabbos, what do we see from here? That you even have to what? You don't listen to your parents, listen to God. Question. What's a Havamina? Why would you have a Havamina to say, oh yeah, my parents asked me to do something, I better do it? You mean to tell me, not for the fact that it was in the same pasuk, you'd have thought that your parents told you Machal Shabbos you would do it? You understand? Everyone knows this, right? Everyone knows this when they were a kid, right? Oh, what's the reason why Shabbos in pasuk is fear of parents? Because if they would have asked you, don't do it. Why? Because the fear of God is greater. What type of Havamina is that? What type of Havamina is that? And it's interesting. It's specifically Shabbos, which is the 4th Tibra. But where is this mentioned? This is mentioned specifically by Mora, by fear. So it says in Meshech Chochmah, there's something going on here that you need to appreciate. And I think this is both a hashkafic insight and a halachic, practical halachic insight as well, and it'll really shed a lot of light on the entire mitzvah behind it. So let's continue reading this Meshech Chochmah. He's going to say the following. Kulam chavim bichvodi. Right now I just read the brackets. Since everyone is chav bichvodi, you listen to God and not your parents. Kain ha dekari the kavod av akachsher mitzvah hu inyan muskamod. Listen, to do kabed at the v'chaved imecha, that's what the language is, muskal. It's so logical. Meaning, the nations of the world, people do kabed at v'chaved imecha. By the way, we should define what is kabed at v'chaved imecha. If you go down to source 7, what's source 7? The last word, it says kibud. What's kibud? The Gemara asks, ma'achilu mashkeh ma'abishu u'mechasem machnisu motzi. What's another word for kibud? It's
caring for.
Care for them. Okay? Caring. That's what the Gemara defines caring. Mora, if you take a look at the beginning of source 7, is a Mora. Mora is lo med bim kamalo, sheb bim kamalo, soter dvarav lo machriya. What's Mora? Mora is
reverence.
Okay, reverence. And therefore, you can't sit in the seat, and you can't stand in the place, and you can't. Right? It's on some level. Mora is like the Lotas says, right? Don't do this. Don't cut them off, and don't sit in their place. And don't contact. Don't. And what's kibud is do this, do that, do this, do that, do this, do that, do that, do this, do that. Right? So in some way. I don't know if anyone actually says that straight out, but in my head, that's how I wrap my head around it, right? Kibud is like the positive things you do to your parents, and the Mora is like almost the negative, right? So again, says the Meshech Chochmah, the positive things that you do for your parents, he said, is rational. You go ask Jones, and you say, Jones, did you take care? Of course. Why would you take care of your parents? Because what's the rational argument for why you should take care of your parents and clothe them? Because they did it for you when you were a kid, when you were a baby, or maybe they're still buying you clothes. I don't know, right? In this case, not an adult, young adult. Some people even when they're married, right? Okay. But so therefore, says the Meshech Chochmah. Why is it that even it's so rational? It's what I call tit for tat. They did it for you. When they're older, you're going to do it back for them. Tit for tat, right? Makes sense. It's a rational argument, and therefore, since it's rational, you don't need the Torah necessarily, right? Anyone could come up with that logical tit for tat type of relationship. Let's continue reading. Scroll back up. Shmana. Deze eino matzir b'seichel shemitzvah ben adam l'chevra yidche isu divrei Torah. So if it's about kibud avaim, you'd never think that a mitzvah ben adam l'chavero would push off a mitzvah of ben adam l'makom. So why isn't it, says the Meshech Chochmah, that where does the Torah need to be mechadesh me? That you listen to your parents, you listen to God and not listen to your parents, not in the Seder Dibrot, Kavod Devicha v'yadimecha. Because Kavod Devicha v'yadimecha, as it's written, the Seder Dibrot is much more bin Adam lachavero based. Okay, then you have to ask your question, why is it the fifth, not the sixth, right? Okay. But what the Meshech Chochmah wants to say is that there's two aspects of Kibud Avayim, of your relationship to your parents. One is Kibud Avayim, which is rational, bin Adam lachavero component, and that is they did it for you, you do it back for them. They paid for your tuition, you'll pay for them for the old age home. Right? Okay?
Same tuition as yours.
Same tuition. Okay. You have to be careful. Which ask which tuition is that? JK or is that grade 11 or is that Shana Barat or that right? Okay. Versus York University tuition is much less. So again, what the Meshech Chochmah, and this is I don't know if he's the first one to say this. It could be other Rishonim, but the way he says it here, I really like. It's really crystallized nicely. Because the Meshech Chochmah is saying that the kibud component is like a ben adam l'chavero component, and therefore there's no havamina to say you violate but adam l'chavero for ben adam makom. Now, what's he going to get to? What's the next step the Meshech Chochmah has to deal with? Why is it specifically by Mora would you might think that kibud avayim would trump God? Because maybe there's a component of kibud avayim which is ben adam l'makom. So you have one ben adam l'makom and another ben adam l'makom, meaning God commands you this, God commands you that. Which one should take precedence? I don't know. Therefore, you need to have the Chiddush of the Torah that says, no, you listen to God, not your parents. But you follow? Because only in the God commands A, God commands B. Which takes precedence? I have a havamina to say maybe I should violate Shabbos and listen to my parents. After all, there's a bin adam l'makom component. Comes on the Torah and says, no, you don't. You do not violate Shabbos. That's Meshech Chochmah. Let's see that inside. Mishum shebekavod avivim al yish mashu nogeh la'adon makom. There's a component of adon makom. V'zeher yesh dak shekol mostot ha'kabbalah ma'ar Sinai hu ha'kabbalah ne'manav v'nitanah Moshe miSinai. What is this? There's another component, and there's a component which is not ben adon l'chavero. It's ben adon l'makom. What's that component? That your parents are part of the Masorah. Meaning, what gives you the connection to Har Sinai? That's your parents. So there's a parent component, which is a godly component, a connection to Har Sinai. That's the God component. That's the Ben Adam Lamakom component. That's the different dimension to it. Shekol mosdot hakabbalah Har Sinai kabbalah min v'nitanah Moshe miSinai misaral dor achrei dor lezaram achreim. The generation. You are part of that generation. And how did you become part of that generation? Because you were born. Because God created. Because your parents created you. והודיע בנים לבני בניהם יום אשר עמדו בחורב וכן עד עולם לכן דור יבזה אביו ילעג למוסרי הקבלה אז פסק תורה מישראל ולכן בזה הגדר יש בכיבוד אביו גם דברים מנהגים על מצוות השם וכל התורה. So it says Meshech Chochmah and he's saying and what he's saying is not what I said, and I want to change what I said before. He's saying even the component of kibud avayim has a dimension of bin adon l'makom. You follow? He's not saying, I said before, because I forgot what Meshech Chochmah said, that there's kibud avayim, which is ben adam l'chavero, and mora, which is ben adam l'makom. He's saying no. He's saying even in kibud, there's these two dimensions. He said why? Because the reason why I have to dress my parents and help them out and feed my parents if need be is because in kibud I have to do those things not just because tit for tat, because they brought me into the world of the Jewish people. because they brought me as part of the Masorah, Yom Asher Amarta B'chorev. I'm part of this. They brought me as part of the Jewish people, and that obligation. It has a ben adam lamakom component to it as well. Now he's going to say also that perhaps Mora also might have the same idea, but that's not for now. What I want to show you is we see here that ben kibud avayim has dual component to it. There's a tit for tat, there's a rational, there's ben adam lachavero dimension, and then there's another totally different dimension, which is ben adam lamakom. Specifically Jewish, being part of the Masorah. That's not.
So for a ger, does that have any?
Okay, good. Very good. Now, maybe we can say the following. What's first reason why we are obligated to serve our parents is because we owe them service that they've done for us. What's the second? Because the Torah commands us that we have to give kavod to our parents. Why? Because they brought us into this world, into the world of Masorah, into part of the world of the Jewish people. It's a religious, ben adam l'makam component to it. Two aspects of it. So if that's true, we could say the following. Yaakov Avinu was not responsible, for fulfilling the first aspect of kibud avayim, meaning because he was learning Torah. So since he's learning Torah, parents would have to say, okay, my kid's learning Torah, I can't expect him to honor me. I give it over to my son, let him learn Torah. However, what happens, if a person is in a situation where a parent's needs are taken care of by somebody else, so tit for tat doesn't matter. Meaning, Esav is taking care of his parents in many ways, so in that case, he's learning Torah, the basic needs of mom and dad are taken care of. Yaakov is exempt because he's learning Torah. But what happens, by the way, but the second component of kibud avayim, is like ben adam lamakom. And if you're in the house of Lavan, you're not learning Torah anymore. So it's true your basic needs are being taken care of still, but the problem is that that's not the only thing you need to do. There's another whole component Yaakov cannot to do for you. If you're learning Torah, you'd be exempt from it. But what about the years that he was in the house of Lavan? That is what the Meshech Chochmah says, why Yaakov Avinu was punished for being in the house of Lavan. Because there's another entire different component, that even though the needs are just one component, what about the other component, the Ben Adam Lamakom component? If you're learning Torah, you're exempt, which is why he wasn't punished for the years he studied in the house of Shem Vever, when he was in Yeshiva Shem Vever, when he was in the house of Lavan, he failed to fulfill a component of Kibud Avayim. Okay. Now, if that's true, what I want to show you is... let's take a look. Look at the Hilchot Mamrim in the Rambam, 610. Go to source 5. Let's say a parent goes crazy. Rachmana litzlan. I don't know if you ever dealt with grandparents maybe that had dementia. Very difficult, right? The dementia and aging is not an easy thing. So if a parent, like 5, Mishin Drabedato shall aviv shall imo mishtadel din hagim mehem kefi da'atam ad shurcham alehem. Parents go, Rachmana litzlan, they go a little crazy, dementia. You have to work with them and do with them as best as you can. V'im iev sharlo, so you just can't do it. You just can't provide for them what they need. It's called a nursing home, called getting them full-time help. It's called, you just can't. You physically can't do it. You're not trained. You can't do it. Why? Shenishtato bioter. You can't do it. Yinacham, v'yelech you leave them, v'yitzaveh acharun hanigo karu lahem, and you tell others to take care of them. A nursing home, hiring help, right? It happens often, right? Child they just can't take care of their parents. Logistical reasons, practical reasons. So when you take a parent to the hospital, you take the parents, if it's that serious, or to an old age home, or again, what are you doing? You're fulfilling your responsibility through shlichim. They're essentially an agent of your will, right? That's what's happening. So, and this, by the way, this is the halacha in Shulchan Aruch as well. How are you supposed to understand this? The following. The first aspect of Kibud Av V'Em, a parent is entitled to certain services from the child. A child is obligated to do certain things. So again, if a child instead decides to hire somebody else in order to be a shliach for the parent, he's fulfilled his obligation. Why? Because what's your obligation? Ma'achel u'mashke, to feed, to clothe. You're doing that. Al yedei shliach. However, the second component of kibud is missing. And what is that? The ben adam, the makom component.
Yes.
However, once it becomes impossible or unreasonable to take care of them, God would never make you obligated to do something which would be unreasonable, and therefore you'd be exempt from it. But if it's not unreasonable, if it's not that difficult, you have to do it yourself. When is the only exemption? When you don't have to do it yourself and you can do it al yedei acherim. When you just can't do it. Your parent has dementia. The parent needs 24/7 care. And you have to have 3 people on a rotation in order to be able to keep up with it. In such a case, you're exempt. Oh, how come it has to reach such a level? Why isn't that? Why can't you just say, wait a second, even if it's not difficult, I should be able to hire a shaliach? The answer is because it's not just about taking care of their needs, right? Taking care of their physical needs is only one component. What about the ben adam lamakom component? You're still obligated. When would you say you wouldn't be obligated? When it's so difficult, you can't do it yourself. As we see here. Now, what about adopted children? Let's play this through. Are adopted children obligated in Kibud Av V'Em for their biological parents?
Depends when were they adopted.
Okay, good. So hang on, let's talk this through.
With an adopted person.
So we have would adopted children be obligated in Kibud Av V'Em for their biological parents? Adopted parents.
I mean, halakhically, their biological parents aren't even their parents anymore.
Well, careful. Wait a second. Not necessarily what we said. Because if it's about Hakarat HaTov, they brought you into this world, they're your creator, so then your biological parents, wouldn't you still have an obligation?
Well,
depends how we explain it, yeah.
Like, let's say all they did was brought you into this world and then put you up for adoption right away. So you were brought up and fed and clothed by somebody else. So then maybe you would even have more. You would have to kind of split it.
So if we use our tit for tat thing, my parents didn't clothe me or feed me or give me education or pay for anything. They abandoned me. Or, again, Rahman, let someone ever happen, I was saying it's their fault.
Yeah.
So they didn't do all those things. Maybe I wouldn't have to be obligated to give. Because, again, if it's all about a rational argument, so the rational argument is they did it for me when I was a kid, when I was young, when I was growing up. I will do it for them. But if they never did it for me, maybe I'm exempt. But on the other hand, if they brought me into the world of, if they were Jewish, if they brought me into the world of Torah, and they were still had this idea, they're responsible for the fact, part of the Masorah. So the question is, well, wait a second, is that just a biological thing? Or is that an educational thing? If it's a biological thing, they brought me into the world, fine. But if it's an educational thing, they didn't contribute.
Mm-hmm.
So the ben adam lechaver aspect of Kibud Av V'Em towards his adopted parents, he could very much be obligated to, because if they're the ones who are feeding him and clothing him and educating him and spending money, then he would have to do that for them when he gets older. Another makam component might not apply to adopted parents if you say that there's only my halachic parents I'm obligated because they're part of the Masorah of tradition. And by the way, if you were to ask a non-Jew and say, who should you have greater respect for? They would probably rationally argue, those people that took care of me. Right? The rational reason, again, if it's a sichli, if it's a rational argument, the rational argument is they took care of me, I'll take care of them. Tit for tat. But we know there's a second component to Kibud Av V'Em. That's as if they were Jewish and they brought you into the world and they connected you to Har Sinai. So that second component, perhaps you'd have to think, and you have to sense for Kibud Av V'Em to your biological parents, not your adopted parents. Now, not so simple. But maybe you could argue that. Okay. Now, one more thing I want to mention. Okay, what about if a child technically takes care of their parents, but they don't do it with a sense of simcha. They do it out of anguish and torment. So this is based on source 6. I'm not sure if you learned this Gemara before, but there's a case that Gemara brings where a person can feed his father delicacies and not fulfill the mitzvah, and feed his father stale water and bread and fulfill the mitzvah. Make his father not work and not fulfill the mitzvah, make his father work hard and grinding all day long and fulfill the mitzvah. What's this case? The famous case of when the army officer enlists the father to serve. What does the kid say? I'll serve instead. But what's the condition? That the father still has to work. So the father is grinding food all day long. Why does the kid fulfill the mitzvah? Because what did he do? The kid is now going off to fight in the war, the king's war. So he fulfilled the mitzvah very nicely, gave himself up for his father. But now the problem is that what's the father left to eat? Just scraps around the house. That's all that's around. And he still fulfills the mitzvah. But if you give your dad, a steak, but you do it, Dad, you're old man. Well, you kicked the bucket already. When am I going to inherit all your money? But here, take this steak and drink this wine, you old piece of whatever, right? Such like that. So it's true, you're feeding and you're giving them a nice clip, but that's not what it's about. That's Rashi, source number 6. So Rashi says, when you can do a certain action, and you do a certain action, and you're not. שמכבדו בדברים טובים ונחומים והמלאכה מטיל עליו בלשון רכה אמרה לו לצורך שעה שאין יכולים להתפרנס אלא ביגיעה. Okay, that was the case that I told you. Okay, so that's the kibud perhaps without kavod. Okay, there's one more thing I want to point out. This is I only discovered it this morning actually, with beautiful insight of Rav Soloveitchik. This is a phenomenal book. I don't know if you ever read it before.
I've seen it before.
Family Redeemed. There's a whole section on Kibud Avayim. So that's what I read this morning, and it provided a sense of insight that I really want to share with you. So let's take a look before we start at. Okay, we did this already. Let's go to number 10, 11, 12. Rav Soloveitchik, in his beautiful essay, says, what's the difference between regular ethics and between Jewish ethics, specifically in Kibud Avayim? So we spoke with this a little bit.
Regular ethics, that's like intuition?
Yes, intuitive. He says, I don't understand. If it's the non-Jews, it's a known thing out there. And by the way, we see that non-Jews are also obligated Kibud Avayim, just like Jews. So what's the difference in Jews and non-Jews? And he says, if the ethics are the same, so he argues, this is pretty insightful, he's going to say there's a difference. He's going to prove it. But he's going to take it from, there are different levels in what's called Vavtuacha Kamocha. And just like there's different levels of Vavtuacha Kamocha, so too we view the mitzvah of Kibud Avayim on different levels. There's an ideal and a she'ifa. There's an aspiration that we have to get to in the mitzvah of Vavtuacha Kamocha that's paralleled in the mitzvah of Kibud Avayim, which is not necessarily rational, logical. It's way above that. And he says that is the Jewish ideal, which quote-unquote is far above normative ethics. So a little bit of philosophy. Okay, now he's going to quote Kant. The philosophers, we're not going to because we only have a few minutes, but I want to show you, this is like, I read it very early. I read it very early in the morning, about 5 o'clock in the morning. I hope I made sense of it. We'll see. Take a look at source 10. So he says, the Rav Soloveitchik said, what is the basic relationship in how we deal with other human beings? It's a statement by Hillel, in the famous case of where the convert, right, Gewurt me standing on the whole, right? Which people in Hillel love to talk about. They love that story. Talks about Hillel, talks about, being nice to people. Because they love that story. Anyway, for another time. We have to understand that story. It requires a lot more analysis than just a simple reading of it, but one day. Source number 10. Da'alecha sani l'chavecha lo stavid. What you hate, what you despise, don't do it to your friend. That's Rav Soloveitchik is the most basic, fundamental way of how you look at the other. What you hate, what you dislike, what bothers you, don't do to others. It's a very negative relationship. It's not about building it's about recognizing that there's somebody else that almost is like functional. Meaning, come on, we gotta live together in a society. So I don't like something. I don't like when you smash my car. I will smash your car. Very, very much tit for tat. Very much a negative type of relationship, right? I don't want to live in a world of chaos. If you don't have rules, I don't want chaos. I want my car. You want your car. I don't want you to smash my car. I will smash your car. That's the basic level of Avtach Kamachat Rav Soloveitchik. And that's what Hillel told his convert. Basic, fundamental, keep the peace. Then there's a second level. And this, Rav Soloveitchik, is based on a Rambam in source 11. What's one step higher? So let's take a look. Mitzvat asay shel divrehim levaker cholim. So, again, according to people understand that there's a mitzvah in a Torah called V'ahavta kamocha, but what is subsumed under it is midivrehim. I mean, what is considered the mitzvah is midivrehim, midirabbanan. I mean, it's a biblical fulfillment defined rabbinically. There's a lot of these examples that we see in the Rambam. Rambam has this by perhaps on Inui. What is Inui Yom Kippur? That's Doraisa. What its definitions? Those could be the Rabbi said. This is what it is. Anyways, we've spoken this before. Well, at least I have in the Hillel. Let's take a look at the left. Mitzvah asur divrei levaker cholim. So we know there's a mitzvah to what? Visit the sick, comfort the mourners, havayat hamet, lachnis kala, levayat orchim, lavot orchim, v'yitasek b'chol tzorkei hakvura, lashet l'katef, l'lach lefanav, l'spor v'lachpor v'likvor, v'chelismo kala v'achatan, l's'od b'chol tzorkeihem. So again, the Rambam here lists what we'd call today mitzvah ben adam l'chavera. Right? Sick. There's no prescribed amount. What's simcha? Of chatan v'kala. When they laugh, when they smile, when they get a good present, right? How do you fulfill that? There's the more the merrier. They're subsumed under which is doraita. Says the Rambam, explains Rav Soloveitchik, this is the second level. Not the negative, what you don't like, don't do. This is the positive. What you want, do to others. How it's phrased, said Rav Soloveitchik, this is the second category of Avdurcha Kamocha. That's the positive spin. Not a technical. This is what do you want? What do we appreciate? What do we need? In order to function in this world, we need to have people making sure I have what to eat. You know the line, right? Your gashmius is my ruchnius. Right? Your physical needs are my ruchnius. So explain Rav Soloveitchik that this second level of V'ahavta kamocha is that idea of, in a positive way, of bridging, of forging relationships in many communities, not just based on we have to survive here. No! As a positive outgrowth in communal building. Recognizing that I just can't do it alone. We got to be in this together. You'll feed me today, and maybe later on, I'll get to feed you, but it's a much more of a positive type of V'ahavta kamocha. Then there's that third level. Said Rav Soloveitchik, what's his third level? He uses the famous example of the Kiton Shamayim, the water bottle case, right, in the desert, right? Rabbi Akiva and of Ben Petura. What's the case? Shnaim shayu malchim b'derech ubiyad echad mehem Kiton Shamayim, right? And there's one guy has a water bottle. Im shotim shnehem mitim, im shoteh echad mehem magilah yeshuv. I'm sure you've heard this case before. If there's a water bottle in the desert, it's owned by one who drinks it, right? Says the following. Ben Petora said, Mutav shishtu shneihem v'yamutu. V'al yoreh echad mehem b'mitato shel chavro. Says Ben Petora, split it. How could one person watch his friend pass away? Rabbi Akiva says, no, it's yours. V'chachicha imach. Your life takes precedence. You're not obligated to give up your water to the other person. It's a famous Gemara. Said Rav Soloveitchik, not according to Rabbi Akiva, but according to Ben Petora, this is the next level of Kavod. Not what do I want done for me? Not just tit for tat. Not how can we both come together, but what will I sacrifice? How can I see my friend die? Meaning, and I live. That's the third level, explained Rav Soloveitchik, with a sense of concern and compassion. I'm even willing to give up my life for my friend. That's the next level. Said Rav Soloveitchik, maybe that is the ideal. So again, is that ideal halachic from Kibud Avayim? Maybe not. So who do we pass to like? Appears to pass like Rabbi Akiva. You're not obligated to do that. But it's not usher to do that. That's interesting, by the way. It's not usher, but you're not obligated. Explain the Rav. This is the idea of Kibud Avayim. Take a look at source 13. Ad hechan hu kibud avayim. What is the limit? How far-reaching is it? Afilu not lokisha zehuvim shalo v'ishlicho b'fanav layam. Your father takes your purse of gold, and what does he do with it? Casts it in the water. Lo yachlimenu v'lo yitzeh b'fneihem v'lo yachos kenegdam ela yekaba gzerat akatuv ishtak.
How allowed to hold it against him in any way, pretty much.
Nothing. Bag of gold. You can't get it. Dad, you just threw out $20 million in the ocean. Nothing. Accept it and be silent. Next, I actually think this is even harder. You're wearing your made-to-measure, your Armani suit. You're sitting there in front on the bima. You're sitting there as the CEO of the big bank, and during the big board meeting, comes along your father, or your mother, and what do? They say, shh, it's your $2,500 suit. Right? And they smack your head in front of these people. And they spin. You're in front of imagine, Prime Minister Harper is giving like a press conference, and his father comes in front of the cameras and just pulverizes him and rips his clothes and takes off his Prime Minister. You stand there and you take it, because that's what God commanded. By the way, interesting. Only the second one he puts in the God component. Right? Interesting, right? By the Rabbi. She'ilu melech basar v'dam gazar alav davar shehu mitzaer yoter mizeh. Let's face it, kings have given us more difficult decrees. We have no choice. We have to accept them. How much more so from God himself? So the first one, you lose money. The second one, you're shamed. You're embarrassed. The second one's probably much more difficult. Okay, money's money, but public shaming, public embarrassment is much more difficult. Said Rav Soloveitchik, this is way above the ethical norm. This is not expected in the world out there. You go interview people and they'll say, of course, I gotta help my father, help my mother, maybe help them move their apartment, maybe help pay for rent. But no one would say, put up with this. Said Rav Soloveitchik, this is where the halacha goes above the ethical norm. This is where halacha rises above what usually is demanded from people in the regular basis. Just like V'aftacha Kamocha has this higher level, meaning that Ben Petora says, share the bottle, don't see your friend die. Maybe that's not codified halachically, but said the Rav, if your parents want to do these things to you, that is codified halachically, and you have to take it. So we see that how high is kibud av v'em, how much to respect our parents. So maybe the basic, fundamental, maybe the second two levels of kibud av v'em, maybe even the first three levels of kibud av v'em, maybe. I'm not saying the third one is even. But for sure the first two, said the Rav, are probably considered the universal norm, the regular expectations. But then it's taken to a different level, to a different sphere, how much we have to really perform the mitzvah kibud av v'em, which is why it's such a hard mitzvah to fulfill, such a difficult thing to do. It's such one of the most difficult mitzvah in the Torah. We know perhaps the greatest reward of L'man Yirichun Yamecha. Why? What's this notion of L'man Yirichun Yamecha? So I want to take it to where we started from, and with this we're going to conclude. Source 14. Kabed et avicha v'et imecha v'ne'amar kabed et Hashem hunecha hishva katuv kibud av v'em im kavod hamakom. Shenamar ish imo vaviv tirau v'namar tashem lakacha tira. Hishva katuv morat aviv v'em lemorat hamakom. We see that there's a comparison between mora, fear of God, and fear of your parents. And the Gemara here says, Shlosha shutafin yesh badam. I made reference to it before, that there are three partners in the world, mom, dad, and God. I want to dwell among them. What's going on here? I think this is the next thing. How do we attain? What does the man yochun yamecha mean? So it could be understood as the following. How do you, and this is what the Rav says, how do you attain eternal life? Why specifically the kibud av v'em, eternal life? Because if you truly recognize and you're able to have that higher level of kibud av v'em for your parents, and you recognize that it's the same level as God, he says, then you lead an eternal life. Because then what happens? You might physically die, but then you're going to have children, and their children are going to have children, because what does it connect to? Yom asher amarta b'chorev. Because we all stood at Sinai. So by you having children, by you continuing the Masorah, it's as if, not as if, you are fulfilling, or it will be fulfilled through you, by you continuing to perpetuate the values that your parents teach you. What essentially are you doing? You're fulfilling what? Ritzono shel makom. By fulfilling Ritzono shel makom, that is exactly eternal life. Chayei olam haba. Now we can connect it to the past few weeks about olam haba, right? That we've been talking about. Because what happens when you fulfill the mitzvah is this: your soul is eternal. Your soul is eternal. What allowed your soul to exist in this world? The soul was given by God, Elokai, Neshama Torah Nasata Bi. Who give you the physical, the DNA component? Well, that's biology. That's what, we have people here in biology, right? And that's that. And when the two come together and merge, and they fulfill Ritzono Shel Makom, then there's a sense of eternal existence. So it's true the body and the soul split, but as we've been discussing, they eventually come back together, and that really is this idea how L'man Yechun Yamecha al Hadama, and that's how we'll ensure eternal life, and specifically through fulfilling Kibud av v'em, is when you're really able to truly demonstrate a sense not just of tit for tat to your creators, but a sense of love and a sense of admiration, a sense of respect. And it's not just, and here's an interesting mitzvah, it's not just the technical mitzvah you need to fulfill. The technical mitzvah is easy. Okay, I fed, I got them dressed, but not only that, we see that the component of Kibud av v'em is not just a technical fulfillment, you have to have the right hashkafik, you have to have the right intent, you have to do it with a smile, or else you don't actually get the schar either. And what's the schar the Gemara says? Olam haba. So it's how we see everything truly is interconnected, and really that's the beauty and the struggle, but I think the ultimate beauty of the mitzvah of Kibud av v'em, there should be zoche to keep and to fulfill and attain that highest level as understood beautifully by Rav Soloveitchik, as brought down by the Rambam and the Gemara as well.